Welcome. Thanks for joining me. My name is Todd Christensen. I am founder of ShihpooCentral.com. Today we're going to be talking about the foods that we are feeding our Shihpoo puppies so that we can raise them to be healthy and strong. This is not an easy subject. There are so many opinions, and really that's what they are, and that's what this is. What I'm going to say right up front is when you need to make a decision, if you are torn, go directly to the sources. There are plenty of scientific sources on different diets to feed your puppy. Do not go directly to a specific food manufacturer. Don't go to a blog that promotes that particular type of diet. Go to the sources, and I'll share a few with you here below in this video and on my blog. The difficulty, first of all, comes from there's the variety of foods to choose from. If you are going to buy food from the store, the aisle it feels like a football field long. You go up and down that aisle and figure out which one to choose. And in the end, for a lot of people, it comes to which is the cheapest. Others, when you start looking at the ingredients list, it comes to what's the first two ingredients, or what's the simplicity of the ingredients, what are the claims. Really, if you haven't decided, if you haven't chosen the food before you go to the store, your basis for that food choice is not going to be the best one. So you have to look at, we're going to go with wet food, dry food, a mixture of the two, where it's mostly dry food and maybe wet food as a treat. The wet food, of course, is much more expensive than the dry. It does not have it's mostly just meat, versus a dry that has some grains and a few other vitamins and minerals that are specifically engineered or put in for a dog nutritional that your Shihpoo's nutritional needs. So be careful also with fad diets. We may approach these diets with the idea that we are going to do the best thing in our power for our dog, but we tend to transfer onto our dog our own either emotional values or our own beliefs for humans. The raw diet, for example, is quite popular. There's very little evidence yet for the raw diet, certainly for dogs, that it's any better than what you could buy in a store. All meat diets actually have been, there's some real dangers with the all 100% meat diets. One, the rationale is, hey, dogs come from wolves. Wolves are carnivores. So it must be, I'm going to just feed the dog all meat. That's all he gets. The problem with that is, one, the wolves don't eat just meat. They eat the entire animal, and inside the animal's intestines and a digestive tract, there's going to be plenty of grains. And so the dog, the dog's cousin, the wolves, do get fiber from consuming their prey. Two, I'm not sure if that's the best argument, because wolves live just a couple of 3-4 years at the most, much shorter lives than what a Shihpoo will lead. And so do we really want to go that direction? We tend to think all natural must be all better. And that's not always the case. It quite often can be. And then third, the idea that Shihpoos should eat the same thing that their wolf ancestors ate fails to take into account that wolves burn far more calories, need much more protein, and the energy density from an all mostly meat diet, then your Shihpoo, who is not maybe running around and love tug of war, of course, but that is not going to be chasing and hunting constantly like the wolf. So beware of some of the drawbacks of an all meat diet. It's not. There are studies that are at a Tufts University. I think it's Cummings veterinarian school of veterinarian. That there are no studies that prove anything the benefit of the all meat or raw meat. In fact, there are studies that are showing that dogs who eat and consume raw meat regularly, the raw meat diet, are much more prone to have problems with salmonella, listeria, E. coli, and all the other bacteria that dogs are just as susceptible to as humans are. So when you're looking at a package of food to purchase, and you're going up and down the aisle, find one whose first ingredients is a whole meat. We talk about whole grains. I'll get there in a minute, but avoid foods whose first ingredient is not some sort of meat at all. There's a lot of them that first ingredient is a grain, and then if it uses terms like rendered or byproducts, then or meal, that's not the type of whole protein meat that we need to that we want to provide for our Shihpoo. When you read that kind of description of meat, think about hot dogs. I mean, hot dogs are kind of meat byproducts. Yes, they can be all beef. It means it comes from a cow, but it doesn't say where in the cow comes from. You want to find a food that is 25 to 30% meat by weight, typically. Something else to look for when you are reading the ingredients of your dog food label for your Shihpoos, you want to find those that have ingredients that provide sufficient fatty acids. They are healthy for humans and for Shihpoos as well. Those can come from ingredients such, of course, omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids from any kind of seafood. So if there are some seafood meats in the food, that's going to be a very positive ingredient in there. But it can also come from linoleic acid, as well as, and I'm going to read this because I don't know how to say it, arachidonic acid. I probably just slaughtered that. My apologies. Which can come from soybeans or from canola oil or from chicken. So if you're seeing those ingredients of fish, the soybeans, the canola oils, or the chicken, then the food likely has the sufficient fatty acid that your Shihpoo is going to need. The second ingredient you want to watch for on the list of ingredients will be whole grains and then vegetables. If it does list something, a grain, and says mill run or milled, or gives some other impression that it's not whole grain, if it doesn't say whole, it's probably been divided and only have a portion. It's not going to contain the entire grain that will provide the dog with the nutrition that he needs or she needs. So look for whole grains and minimize things like corn and lentils, which are some of the cheaper fillers. Doesn't mean that you should avoid all foods that have any kind of corn or any kind of lentils in it. Ideally, you want to look for food that has a variety of sources, multiple sources of nutrition. That after the grain, it's going to have some vegetables in it. Things like, for example, sweet potatoes that will have some health benefits to your puppy. But if it's just the meat or just the meat and a grain, and then filler vitamins, additives, and things like that. You do want to find one that has some vegetable sources for the nutrition as well. Let's go ahead and look down the list of this example of a food right off the shelf. It's quite likely you'll recognize it. Many of you might be using this food for your Shihpoo. First ingredient, ground whole. You like the word whole? Ground whole grain corn. Great, it's got a whole grain in it. That should not be the first ingredient for your Shihpoo. That should be the second ingredient, whole grain corn. Yeah, there's better whole grains that you could use, but it's better than non-whole grain. The second ingredient, chicken byproduct meal. Mentioned earlier that you want to look for a food whose first ingredient is a whole meat. So whole chicken or whole chicken, the meat. You don't want meal. You don't want byproduct. You don't want rendered. So that's the second ingredient. It's highly likely not going to be the full food that you want, whole food that you want. Then you got next is the corn gluten meal. Again, it's ground. Then comes the animal fat. Dogs do need fat. It's good to have it in there, and there's your source of omega-6 fatty acids, which is a positive thing. Then comes meat, but meat and bone meal. Again, it's ground up, likely ground up bone that is been processed, or just it's not the whole food that you want for the source of protein or calcium. You do need some bone meal in there. That's a healthy thing. And then you get into the soybean, which is healthy to have there, and then ground whole grain wheat. Then you get into the natural, the additives, the very small things there. So overall, I would look at this, and my concern here would be that the meat is not the number one ingredient, and it's not a whole meat, protein source meat. So I would, if it said just chicken, it didn't say byproduct, that would be a much better idea for me. And then corn, if it had the whole grain corn, yeah, I'd think about that. But if the third ingredient then adds even more, just corn meal, that is basically being used as filler to give it some weight and to fill the dog up more than maybe the full nutrition that you want to provide for your Shihpoo. But in all, it's got the much of the you see from the analysis there. It has much of the food, the nutritional value that you want to provide for your Shihpoo. This next review, let's go down this ingredients list. You'll see it has, it starts off with beef. It doesn't say beef products or byproducts or anything along those lines. It just says beef, which is great. That insinuates anyway that is 100% beef muscle and a beef tissue, so that it's a good product, good resource or source of protein for your Shihpoo. And then the second ingredient, there's the whole grain corn. We like to see that. Barley, not bad to have there. And then soybean, which is good to have the soybean meal, followed by whole grain wheat, right? So you got a lot of grains in there. And then come the byproducts, the poultry byproducts meal, chicken byproducts meal, beef fat naturally preserved, so that that's going to be the source of the omega oils, fatty acids. And then you get down to some additional things like the corn gluten meal, and then egg, which is good to have the egg in there for additional protein, and with some more oatmeal in there. So there's a variety of whole grains and types of grains, and lots of different vegetables, grains to be in there, which is a great list there that I would look for and be happy to provide that to our Shihpoos. take a look at one last ingredients list from a store a product available on most store shelves. You'll see here, I want to talk first about, or point out first that under the guaranteed analysis, the very first item there, crude protein, 26%. That's right there in that 25 to 30% range that we recommend. Good to have that there. It's good to see that it has fiber, and we do want that fat as well. First ingredient, beef. Again, solid beef, great. Chicken, a byproduct meal. You're going to see that in a lot of different foods, the byproduct. Followed by ground yellow corn. I'd like to see whole grain corn, or a whole grain ground corn. And the same thing with the next ingredient as far as the ground wheat. Then you get the brewer's rice, and then the meat and bone meal. It's a source of calcium and the animal fat. So it goes on, but that first ingredient is great. Have the beef there, the chicken byproduct, or that's it's not unhealthy for your dog. It's going to have nutritional value for your Shihpoo. So it may or may not be the one that you're looking for, but and here's something else I would say as we're looking at that. You get down about the fifth, sixth line there, you start to see things like filet mignon, smoky natural flavor. That's just an additive, but it sure sounds nice. Be careful not to be taken just because something sounds cool. Of course, filet mignon is something you would want to order for yourself. And if you were actually to give it to your dog, he or she would love you for forever. Already does, I know. But then you get down into the vitamins and the minerals, the zinc sulfate and the monocalcium phosphate and the niacin. That's not unhealthy to see that kind of thing, those kind of things in there. Dried carrots. Those are going to be necessary additives in many nutritional products for your dog. Your dog does need those certain vitamins and minerals. Of course, I'm never a fan of adding food coloring. So you're going to see that quite often as well. But most of those things, you've probably heard somebody say, if you can't pronounce it, it shouldn't be in your food. Be careful with taking that too far, because some of these things we have a hard time pronouncing. Riboflavin, because that sounds like, well, if you're not familiar with some of the nutritional additives, you might think, well, what's that doing in there? But that's a really important part of dog and human nutrition. Potassium iodide, it's going to have, these are added there for a purpose, not just to make up for what's lacking above, but to have a balanced diet for your Shihpoo. Let's just talk about hydration, proper hydration for your Shihpoo. This is really simple. The rule of thumb is 1 ounce of water for every pound that your dog weighs. So if you have an 8-pound Shihpoo, whether that's an adult, a small adult, or if you have a growing adolescent Shihpoo at 8 pounds, that's a cup of water a day. That doesn't seem like a lot to you and me, but our Shihpoos are much smaller than we are. And we sometimes have a hard time with drinking 4 or 5 cups of water a day. There is some moisture in a lot of dog foods. They do get some from that, but make sure that there is available to the dog 1 ounce. So that's 8 ounces, of course, is a cup. So for most Shihpoos that are that 14, 15, 13 pounds, about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of water a day, your Shihpoo will drink when he or she is thirsty. So, if you see that she or he is not drinking at all over extended periods of time, then it's time to contact the vet. But if water is disappearing regularly, your dog is getting hydration. Just make sure that it's there as the dog needs it. Let's talk about size of the food. 2 things here. The bag size. We made the mistake when we got our first Shihpoo of buying a 50-pound bag of puppy food. Our puppy could not go through that in a year. And long before he would have gone through it, it went stale and bad. So do yourself a favor. Yeah, it's not as the price per ounce is going to be higher, but get a smaller bag so that it doesn't go bad. And then the size of the bites itself. Now, wet food, that's one thing. You don't have to worry about that. But dry food, make sure that you get small dog kibble that your puppy can chew easily. We made that mistake as well. We had on our second, I think for our second puppy, we accidentally got a dog food that had adult size kibbles. That's what you call the pieces. And he had a hard time chewing on it. Surprisingly small mouths for even for a 10-pound or an 8-pound or 6-pound puppy. But do get dog food that has puppy size kibble in it. Let me share this important point about providing nutrition for your Shihpoo. It is so hard once you start giving table scraps to your puppy to stop. If you've already done that, then what I'm going to recommend is that you put your Shihpoo in his or her crate during mealtime. Otherwise, of course, he or she is going to be clawing at you, or like our younger Shihpoo doesn't paw; he just bumps us with his nose. Really funny. But if you're at the table, that's what you're going to get. If you've been providing table scraps to your puppy, stop, because you can do a little, but the most nutrition they should be getting from table scraps is 10%. Most human food has way too much salt in it. The amount of salt that we eat is not healthy at all for our Shihpoo. And you never know what you've put in your food sometimes, or what's in a can of food, or that you've ordered out. And it might have things in it like onions and garlic that we forget are not good for our Shihpoos. So just do yourself and your puppy especially a favor. Don't give in to those adorable eyes and that whine. Put the dog in the crate. It's part of the whole pack mentality anyway. If you let your dog eat with you, he or she begins to think that he or she is the alpha dog and will start acting like it. Put her or him in the crate while you eat first. That's a big thing. Alpha dogs eat first. If your dog is eating before you and you wonder why you have behavioral issues, that's one of the biggest points that an alpha dog will be, that makes an alpha dog. I get to eat the food first. So just place your dog in the crate, close the door if they're going to whine and cry about it for a little while, till they get to the point that they understand you're the alpha dog, you're eating first, and then you don't have to worry. You've cleaned up the table, then you let them out. They're going to look for it, and eventually they'll realize that, okay, I'm not the alpha dog. I will eat what I have in my bowl.